Imagine walking through golden corridors that glimmer like sunlight trapped in metal. Walls so beautiful they hide screams no one ever heard. Inside the Sultan's palace, beyond jeweled doors and silken curtains, lay a world forbidden to the public eye. A cage draped in luxury, where women disappeared, their names erased, their stories silenced. Tonight, we're pulling back that curtain to reveal what truly happened inside the Sultan's golden cage, where beauty masked brutality and freedom was an illusion. Centuries ago, behind the majestic walls of the Ottoman Empire's imperial palaces, there existed a world both enchanting and terrifying, a world known as the harem. To outsiders, it was the realm of unimaginable luxury, a paradise filled with silk, gold, and fragrance. But for the women who lived within, it was often a place of invisible chains and whispered fears. The Sultan's harem wasn't just a home, it was a prison of velvet and diamonds. The very word harem means forbidden, a space set apart, sacred, and untouchable. Only a few ever truly knew what happened inside those golden walls, and even fewer survived long enough to tell the tale. The harem was the center of the Sultan's private world. A palace within a palace. It housed his wives, concubines, servants, and eunuchs who guarded the gates. Every woman brought into the harem was selected for her beauty, intelligence, or grace. Many were enslaved, sold by desperate families, or captured in wars. Some dreamed of power, of becoming the Sultan's favorite, of rising from obscurity to unimaginable wealth. Yet for most, that dream quickly turned to a nightmare. Inside, every breath was measured, every step watched, every whisper could decide life or death. Behind its silken curtains, the harem functioned as a world of rigid hierarchy. The Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother, ruled over the women like an empress, commanding loyalty and fear. Below her were the favored consorts, the concubines, and finally, the countless nameless girls brought in from across the empire, Circassian, Georgian, Greek, or African, each stripped of her identity and given a new name, a new fate. Some were trained in music and poetry, others in the art of seduction or silence. To please the Sultan meant survival. To displease him meant disappearance. Historians and travelers described the harem with fascination, but few realized its darker side. The Sultan's golden cage was not only built of marble and gold, it was built of secrets. Every vanished woman left behind questions no one dared to ask. Was she sent away, quietly executed, or erased from record altogether? The harem was a world designed to conceal truth beneath beauty, and as the centuries passed, countless lives were buried in silence, their stories locked behind doors gilded with deceit. Where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoy dark history stories like this, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share your feedback in the comments. The story begins deep within the Palace of Topkapi in Istanbul, where sunlight filtered through latticed windows, casting honey-gold shadows across marble floors polished by centuries of footsteps. The year was 1623, and the empire was at its height, rich, feared, and drowning in power. Within the gilded maze of chambers lived over 300 women, each one belonging to the Sultan in name, but none free in spirit. Among them was a young Circassian girl named Layla, whose beauty was so striking that even the eunuchs paused when she passed. She had been brought from the northern mountains, sold at 12, and trained for years in obedience, music, and silence. They told her she was lucky, chosen by fate to live among the Sultan's most precious possessions. But Layla knew from the first night that the golden cage glittered only to hide the rusted bars beneath. Every morning began with the same ritual, the sound of soft drums echoing through the marble halls, the rustle of silk as the women lined up for inspection, their faces painted with fragile perfection. The Sultan rarely appeared in person. His choices were made through whispers, gifts, and rumors. One glance from his attendants could raise a woman to power, or condemn her to vanish overnight. Layla learned quickly to keep her eyes lowered, her words scarce, her smile gentle. She learned the art of invisibility, because in the harem, attention was dangerous. One could rise too fast, shine too brightly, and become a target for others desperate to survive. The Valide Sultan, mother of the ruler, presided like a silent queen over their lives. Her gaze was sharp, her commands absolute. She had once been a slave herself, and she ruled the women with the same iron that had once bound her wrists. Beneath her were layers of intrigue. Favorites who used beauty like a weapon, attendants who carried secrets between rooms, and eunuchs who served as both jailers and spies. The harem was less a home and more a living organism, a place that breathed deception. Behind every curtain, alliances were forged and broken in whispers. Even laughter was measured, because joy could be mistaken for rebellion. Layla's first months passed in a haze of fear and wonder. The gardens smelled of jasmine and roses, yet she couldn't forget the cries she heard at night, soft, choked, and quickly silenced. When she asked an older servant about them, the woman only whispered, "Do not ask. Do not listen." That silence became the law of her life. But then, one evening, a chance encounter changed everything. While delivering a tray of pomegranates to the Sultan's chambers, Layla caught the eye of a man who wasn't supposed to look at her at all. The chief eunuch, Khalid Aga. He was old, but his eyes carried stories. "You remind me of someone," he murmured. And that sentence, simple as it was, marked the beginning of Layla's unraveling. Khalid began to leave small notes hidden beneath trays, behind curtains, under pillows. Each note carried fragments of forbidden truth, stories of women who had vanished before her, buried in gardens, drowned in fountains, poisoned during banquets. He told her that beauty was both weapon and curse here. Those who became favorites gained power only until the Sultan's interest faded, after which they disappeared quietly, their belongings distributed, their names erased from every record. The golden cage had no doors. It had only walls that closed tighter with each passing day. Layla's hands trembled each time she read his words. Why was he telling her this? What did he want from her? Then came the night the Sultan summoned her. The attendants dressed her in gold-threaded silk, painted her eyes with kohl, and placed a ruby pendant at her throat. As she entered his chamber, she saw wealth beyond imagining. Walls carved with mother-of-pearl, fountains that glowed under candlelight, and the Sultan himself reclining on velvet. He was younger than she expected, handsome but cold. His smile was the kind that never reached the eyes. "Come," he said softly, and the air seemed to tighten around her. From that night forward, Layla's life changed. She became one of the Sultan's favorites, showered with jewels, given her own attendants, her own room with windows that opened onto the Bosphorus. But with privilege came peril. The other women began to whisper, their smiles sharp as knives. Within weeks, her closest friend, a girl named Selma, vanished without a trace. The attendants said she had fallen ill and been sent away. But Khalid's next note told a different story. Selma had been accused of betrayal, of speaking the Sultan's secrets. She had been strangled at dawn and buried in an unmarked grave beneath the rose garden. Layla's heart froze as she stared out her window at the roses swaying in the wind. She realized then that the harem was not a sanctuary of love. It was a theater of survival, and every woman played her role until the final curtain fell. One day, while walking through the gardens, she overheard two eunuchs whispering near the fountain. They spoke of a plan, a cleansing ordered by the Sultan's mother. Too many women? Too many mouths to feed? Too many potential threats to the throne? By the next moon, one said, some will simply vanish. Layla's blood turned cold. She returned to her chamber trembling, her mind racing. That night, Khalid appeared at her door for the first time. He looked older, exhausted, his voice heavy with sorrow. "You must escape," he said. "You are not the first to try, but you might be the last." Escape from the harem was unthinkable. The walls were guarded by eunuchs loyal to the Sultan, and beyond them lay the city, where no woman could walk alone without being captured. But Khalid had a plan. Hidden passages built centuries earlier for the Sultan's secret movements. "Tomorrow night," he whispered, "when the lamps are dimmed, go to the courtyard gate. Knock 3 times. Someone will be waiting." Layla's heart pounded as she waited for that night. Each second felt like eternity, every noise a warning. When darkness finally came, she wrapped herself in a black cloak, hid the ruby pendant in her sleeve, and slipped through the silent corridors. The palace seemed to breathe around her. Whispers, shadows, memories of those who had tried before her. At the courtyard gate she knocked once, twice, 3 times. But no one came. Layla froze, her breath clouding the cool night air, heart hammering in her chest. Panic clawed at her as the echoes of her 3 knocks bounced against the palace walls. Had Khalid lied? Had she miscounted the time? A single misstep here could mean death, or disappearance into the shadows where the Sultan's harem kept its darkest secrets. Suddenly, a low rustle behind the fountain drew her attention. A figure emerged, cloaked and hooded, moving like smoke through the moonlight. Relief and terror collided in her chest. She was not alone, but she could not yet trust the stranger. "Quickly!" a voice hissed. "This way! Don't look back." The hidden passage was narrow, carved into the ancient foundations of the palace. Layla's hands scraped against the rough stone, her mind spinning with memories of the women who had vanished before her. Some whispered to have been thrown into wells, others drugged and buried beneath tiles. Every story Khalid had told her replayed like a nightmare. She had imagined running before, but now that the moment was here, the walls seemed to close in, thick with the smell of incense and decay. The passage wound downward, twisting like a serpent beneath the city itself. Each step was an exercise in silence. Each breath carried the risk of discovery. As they emerged into a dimly lit tunnel, Layla glimpsed the true scale of the palace's hidden machinery. Chambers abandoned, remnants of forbidden rituals, and bones tucked into corners, as if the walls themselves were keeping score of the vanished. She shivered, realizing that the golden cage had no outward signs of its cruelty. The beauty above masked this underground theater of fear. The Sultan's women were trophies, but also threats, reminders of how fragile power could be. The voice that guided her whispered again, recounting names she had memorized from Khalid's notes. Selma, Fatima, Aisha, women who had tried and failed. Layla's guide, finally revealing himself in the torchlight, was not Khalid, but a young eunuch named Ahmed, whose eyes betrayed years of quiet suffering. "I cannot save all," he said, "but I can help one. That will be enough." Layla felt both hope and despair in equal measure. The corridors twisted again, and she realized the Sultan's labyrinth was not only physical, but psychological. Every turn seemed designed to disorient, to instill a sense of inevitability. You may try, but the cage always wins. Hours passed as they navigated the hidden network, emerging occasionally into forgotten courtyards where moonlight danced on cracked fountains. Ahmed explained the system of traps set for fleeing women. False doors, hidden guards, tunnels that led to the sea but ended abruptly in collapse. The harem's cruelty was methodical, a combination of artistry and terror. Scholars today might compare it to modern surveillance states, control, fear, and invisibility as instruments of obedience. Yet here, centuries earlier, it was woven into the very fabric of the palace, into the stones and gold. Layla recalled the women she had lived alongside, their laughter and tears, their whispered prayers for release. Some had tried to rebel, poisoning eunuchs or writing letters to distant allies, only to vanish without a trace. Their stories, though erased from official records, lingered in secret, memories that refused to die. The Sultan's cage may have contained them, but it could not fully erase their humanity. Each vanished woman left a mark, a shadow that haunted the palace halls like a silent warning. Finally, as dawn approached, Layla and Ahmed reached the edge of the city, a quiet quay where the waters of the Bosphorus lapped against weathered docks. Escape seemed almost within reach, yet even here danger lingered. Patrols roamed unpredictably, and the Sultan's spies were said to operate far beyond the palace walls. Ahmed glanced at Layla with a mix of fear and determination. "Step carefully. One false move and it will all be over. Do you understand?" Layla nodded, gripping her cloak, the weight of every vanished woman pressing down on her shoulders. As they waited in silence, she reflected on the harem's hierarchy, its rituals of appearance and obedience. The Sultan's favorites had once seemed untouchable, adorned with gold, jewels, and privileges beyond imagining. But Layla now understood that those privileges were temporary illusions designed to blind women to the cruelty surrounding them. The palace's architecture itself was a trap, guiding, confining, and punishing simultaneously. Even the gardens, with their beauty and scent, were part of the machinery, hiding bodies and whispers beneath fountains and blossoms. The first patrol passed without incident. Layla's pulse slowed slightly, but she could not allow herself relief. Her mind raced with the consequences of discovery. She would vanish, leaving no trace, becoming one of the harem's many forgotten souls. Yet the thought of freedom, however slim, drove her forward. Ahmed led her to a small boat moored in shadow, covered with tarps and nets. The oars creaked as they pushed off from the dock, slipping silently into the waters that shimmered like liquid silver in the early light. As the city receded, Layla looked back at the towering silhouette of the palace. Its golden domes and spires gleamed, almost mocking in their beauty. She understood that the grandeur above had concealed horrors beneath, horrors that had claimed countless women over generations. Layla shivered, thinking of those who had come before her, whose names and lives had been swallowed by the Sultan's golden cage. Modern historians would later compare the harem to a gilded prison, a paradox of opulence and oppression. But for Layla, it was personal, and the memory of every vanished friend would remain with her forever. Hours passed on the water as the city disappeared behind morning mist. Layla's mind cycled through fear, sorrow, and fragile hope. Every stroke of the oars carried her further from the palace, further from the weight of gold and power, and closer to a life she had never imagined. Yet even as dawn broke over the horizon, the darkness of the harem lingered in her mind, a reminder that freedom, once gained, never erased what had been endured. Layla's escape was not a clean victory. She would live, but her nights were haunted by the voices of those lost. In telling their stories to trusted allies far from Istanbul, she ensured that the truth would survive, even if official records could not. The Sultan's golden cage had claimed many, but Layla became a living testament to resilience, courage, and memory. Each woman's life mattered, and each story preserved was a rebellion against the silence imposed by power. By the time she reached a distant village, far from the city's reach, Layla felt both exhaustion and relief. She had survived where countless others had vanished. Yet she knew the palace's shadows would never fully release her. The harem's echoes had etched themselves into her consciousness. Even centuries later, the tales of vanished women, the cruelty hidden beneath beauty, and the secrets of the Sultan's golden cage endure, reminding us of the human cost behind opulence, power, and absolute control. In the quiet of that new dawn, Layla vowed to remember, to speak, and to honor the lives erased. Her survival was a gift, but also a responsibility. The golden cage had lost one prisoner, but its lessons remained, haunting those who dared to study history and those who sought to understand the cost of power, beauty, and silence. And as we reflect on her story tonight, consider the vanished women, not as distant figures in history, but as real lives, erased, hidden, and silenced. Imagine if you had been one of them, trapped behind gilded walls, forbidden to speak, forbidden to live freely. Layla's journey, perilous and haunting, reminds us of how beauty and brutality can intertwine, how privilege can mask terror, and how memory and courage can defy even the most impenetrable cages. The river carried her forward, but in every ripple, the past whispered, and the golden cage waited silently, timeless and unyielding, for the next story that history might never forget. Layla's first weeks of freedom were a delicate dance between hope and fear, for the Sultan's reach, though weakened by distance, was never fully gone. She settled in a small village far from the city, adopting a new name and learning the rhythms of life outside the palace walls. Every day brought small joys, the sun warming her face, the scent of bread baking in clay ovens, the laughter of children playing in the streets. But each night, the shadows returned. Dreams of golden corridors, whispered threats, and vanished friends haunted her sleep. She remembered Selma, Fatima, Aisha, and countless others whose lives had been stolen, and she vowed to carry their stories forward, preserving what the palace had tried so violently to erase. In the safety of her new home, Layla began recording what she remembered, piecing together names, events, and the intricate hierarchy of the harem. The Sultan's mother, the favorites, the eunuchs, each had a role in the orchestration of fear. Layla's writings became a chronicle of power's cruelty, each passage a warning, each name a defiance. Modern scholars later compared these first-person accounts to what would now be recognized as psychological trauma, the constant stress of surveillance, the invisibility forced upon women, the pressure to perform perfection while fearing death at the smallest misstep. Layla had survived, but the golden cage had left its mark on her mind and body, just as it had on countless others. One evening, as Layla wrote by candlelight, a traveling merchant arrived at the village. He spoke of news from Istanbul. The Sultan had grown older, the harem reorganized, some women vanished, others replaced. His tales carried both fascination and horror. Layla listened, recognizing the patterns, the cycles of selection, favor, and disappearance. The palace, with all its splendor, had changed little. Those who lived there today were likely unaware that every luxury came at the cost of fear, secrecy, and sometimes life itself. She shivered, realizing that while she had escaped the walls of marble and gold, the system endured. Layla also learned to navigate human connection cautiously. Villagers were kind, but she avoided questions about her past. She understood that secrecy was survival, that stories could be dangerous if misheard. Yet, she could not remain silent forever. Letters were smuggled to distant relatives, recounting life in the harem and the fates of those who vanished. Through these letters, the truth slowly spread beyond the palace walls, reaching ears that might one day tell the world what had been hidden for generations. Layla became a vessel for memory, carrying the voices of the erased, the whispers of women who had vanished in golden cages, and the lessons of vigilance and resilience. Nightly dreams brought visions of the palace, its corridors stretching endlessly, chandeliers casting shimmering shadows over women in silks and jewels, faces familiar yet forever out of reach. Layla imagined their lives, the minute choices, the whispered alliances, the fear that governed every movement. She pictured herself walking among them, offering comfort or a secret smile, a small rebellion against the system of invisibility. The Sultan's golden cage was not only a structure of walls and locks, it was a structure of fear and silence, and memory became the only tool of resistance. Each recollection of vanished women was a dagger against forgetting, a declaration that they had lived, felt, and resisted in whatever ways they could. Layla's courage inspired others in subtle ways. Some young women who had lost relatives to the palace wrote to her, seeking guidance and understanding. She counseled them carefully, teaching them to watch, to observe, to survive. The stories of vanished women became a foundation, a living history that refused to be erased. Layla never romanticized the harem. She understood the danger and cruelty that power can impose when absolute. Yet she also recognized the resilience of the women who had endured, survived, or resisted in small acts of defiance. As years passed, Layla aged, yet her memory never dimmed. She revisited the accounts of the Sultan's golden cage, recording minute details of clothing, rituals, music, and punishment, ensuring that every aspect of life and fear inside those walls would not vanish. She reflected on how the harem functioned as a society within a society, a microcosm where social dynamics, hierarchy, and survival instincts dictated behavior, and where each vanished woman represented a calculated exertion of power. These records, though secret at first, would eventually reach scholars and historians, providing an intimate, human perspective that contrasted sharply with the public image of beauty, luxury, and opulence. Layla's later years were spent teaching others what she had learned, using her experiences to illustrate the dangers of unchecked authority, the subtle mechanisms of control, and the resilience required to survive systems built on fear. She spoke of vanished women not as tragic footnotes, but as heroes whose lives, though erased from official records, had meaning and lessons. Through her storytelling, she ensured that the Sultan's golden cage would not claim their memory, that the walls of fear could not imprison the truth indefinitely. In reflecting on her life, Layla acknowledged the paradox that freedom brought both relief and burden. She had escaped physical confinement, but the mental imprint of the harem remained. The rituals, threats, and hierarchy had left a permanent mark, a reminder of what humans endure under absolute power. And yet, the fact that she survived, remembered, and recorded these experiences turned tragedy into a testament, a bridge between the lives erased and the world outside. Her courage became an example of how personal testimony can resist erasure and illuminate the shadows cast by tyranny. Even centuries later, the Sultan's golden cage continues to haunt historians, writers, and those who study power and oppression. Layla's story reminds us that behind every opulent facade, there may exist unseen cruelty. The vanished women were real, each life stolen, silenced, or erased. And yet, their legacy persists through the courage of those who survived. Layla's life became the vessel for their memory, ensuring that the golden cage would be remembered not for its splendor, but for the human cost hidden within. Her story teaches a timeless lesson. Beauty, wealth, and luxury can conceal unimaginable suffering, and history's golden cages, whether physical or metaphorical, often hide the voices of the powerless. Layla's survival was remarkable not only because she escaped, but because she refused to let the vanished be forgotten. Her writings, letters, and personal accounts serve as a testament to resilience, courage, and the importance of memory in resisting systems of absolute control. In the quiet moments of her later life, she would gaze at the horizon, imagining the corridors, gardens, and chambers of the Sultan's palace, filled with women whose names she remembered. She whispered them silently, honoring each life erased, ensuring that even if the golden cage still stood, it could never claim the truth, the memories, or the courage of those who had lived, suffered, and resisted within its walls. Layla passed away many years later, far from Istanbul, but the story she carried did not die with her. Historians and scholars who studied her accounts discovered the intricate, painful, and human truth of the harem. The Sultan's golden cage, once shrouded in secrecy and legend, was finally illuminated by the voices of those it had tried to erase. Layla's legacy became a bridge across time, a reminder that even in the darkest places, memory, courage, and truth endure. And tonight, as we recount her journey, remember this: the golden cage was real, the vanished women were real, and the courage to speak, survive, and remember is what allows history to shine through even the darkest shadows. Their stories endure because someone, like Layla, refused to remain silent. Layla's story leaves us with a chilling truth. Beauty, opulence, and power can mask the most brutal forms of control. The Sultan's golden cage, gleaming with gold and jewels, was not a paradise, but a carefully constructed prison, designed to erase lives quietly, invisibly, without leaving a trace. Each vanished woman represents a story the world almost never heard. A life silenced under the weight of luxury and authority. Yet even in the face of such cruelty, survival and courage persisted. Layla became a living testament to the resilience of the human spirit, carrying the names, faces, and memories of those who were stolen by the palace's invisible chains. Her journey reminds us that the horrors of the past are not just stories in history books. They are human experiences, echoes of suffering and bravery that resonate across centuries. We see parallels today: systems of control that manipulate fear, suppress voices, and hide injustices behind facades of wealth or influence. Layla's escape, her dedication to remembering and sharing the truth, teaches us that memory and testimony are powerful forms of resistance. By speaking, recording, and passing down these experiences, she ensured that the vanished would not be forgotten, and that the dark truths hidden behind gilded walls would reach the world. And this is why stories like hers matter. They compel us to reflect, to question, and to honor those whose lives were erased. As you think about Layla, Selma, Fatima, and countless others, consider how courage can take many forms: surviving, witnessing, remembering, and telling the truth. Their stories endure because someone dared to resist silence, and that act of defiance resonates far beyond the golden walls that once imprisoned them. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon, like the video, and tell us in the comments what type of stories you'd like to see. Share where you are watching from, and let us know what surprised you most about the Sultan's golden cage. Every comment, every reaction keeps the memory of these women alive and reminds us that history, no matter how dark, must never be forgotten.